Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel we have Dan Shapir.
Hey, back in Israel.
We also have Steve Edwards.
Hey, coming from it's definitely fall here in Portland.
I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. It feels like it's been forever since I've been able to record a podcast, so it's good to be back on the mic. My travel schedule and work and everything, it just anyway
we're down to Fort,
right?
Talked to Faraz last week, and I forget who the other people I've talked to.
I wanted to be on that one, but I was at Rocky Mountain Ruby Conference last week.
Good for you.
I
hear lots of interesting things. A lot of interesting things are going on in the Ruby community.
I was going to say, I got the scuttlebutt on a whole bunch of the drama over there.
You gonna dish?
Yeah, I'm going to record Ruby Rogues tomorrow, and we're going to go through what I understand. It's funny, I keep finding myself in a position lately between like this thing and Utah politics and stuff where it's, hey, everybody, this is what's going on, and I can't tell you who's telling me what they're telling me. So,
by the way, as long as
coming from the people directly involved, but they can't go on the record. So,
there's also a bit of drama going on in the React adjacent arena. What with Remix 3 coming out?
I haven't been following that. I'll go check it out.
Yeah, you should. By the way, before we get going, I just recalled that the new state of JavaScript survey is out.
Yes.
And I'm thinking that if our listeners enjoy this podcast and want to help us get to more people, maybe they should vote for us on that survey.
Yes, absolutely.
Speak it, brother.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it's just stateofjs.com.
It's stateofjs.com, exactly, yes.
Yeah. So, and it's always interesting to see what the results of that are. So, or what, the results come out to be. So,
we usually come out somewhere between third and fifth. It would be nice if we can make it a bit higher.
Yeah, but I meant also just, what people are using and where the community's at and all of that great stuff. So,
for sure. It's interesting. Although I always wonder what I should actually quote unquote do with the results.
Right. Yep. But definitely go vote for us.
I was, this is not the topic of the show, and we probably should have a show about it, or maybe bring somebody from the survey on our show.
Mm-hmm.
But I was kind of surprised, or negatively surprised a bit from last year's survey about, or was it some other survey? I think it was actually a different survey about the salaries in the field. They're lower than I would have expected.
Mm-hmm. We should definitely talk about some of that. I mean, the market out there is different from what it has been in the past. I've talked to a number of people that are having trouble finding work. Anyway, there's a lot going on there. It's definitely worth talking about.
And maybe what we're talking about today can explain some of these challenges.
Yeah. Well, and let's go ahead and get into that. So the topic that I put up, I was the one that proposed this topic, was how to use AI in your JavaScript development. And I was mostly focused on tools, not necessarily, hey, how do you build features into your apps with AI, but, how do you use the LLMs and other tools to write your code? And just to get started, I'm curious, what AI tools do you guys use on a regular basis when you're writing code?
Steve, do you want to go first, or should I?
I don't know if you want to call me the grumpy old man or the get off my lawn kind of guy. I haven't really dived into it, full steam ahead. I'll give an example. I was listening to a podcast with a guy from Coinbase, here over the past week, and they are or their goal is to have like 40% of their code written by AI. And he's talking about all their different tool chains and review processes stuff. And I was like, whoa. I mean, I just found out that I have access to Cloud Code through work. Woohoo! Via Bedrock on AWS. I got to get that set up so I can use that. But I primarily use it for troubleshooting. Well, troubleshooting or converting code. It's like, man, I can't. This is. I've got this code here. I want to be able to do this, and I haven't been able to figure something out. How can I do that? And that'll give me a hint, to go that way. Or if I need some short little thing here, write me this, function that does this. And I will never, ever just say, okay, that's good. Put it in and let it rip. I'm always going to, test it out and make sure it works. And usually I'm going to have to tweak it or something like that. But it's usually just for troubleshooting, hey, I'm stuck on this. Help me get this figured out. Or, getting over, maybe giving me ideas to get past a thorny issue. But that's about it, at least for me.
When you say test it out, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm going to run it I'm going to put it in, but I'm going to run it and run it through the different iterations and different use cases and make sure that it's actually working. And sure, then, sometimes there's like variable naming issues where I'm going to name it to be more consistent with the way we do it in the project and that kind of stuff. But
sure, but I mean, test it out is something that I assume you do to your own code as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So in that regard,
I've worked with people who don't.
Yeah, well, okay. You could be an optimist, I guess. By the way, that story about what's the difference, like the optimist is the glass half full, the pessimist says the glass half empty, and the developer says we could have used a smaller glass.
Right.
But yeah, no, I mean, what I was trying to say, Steve, is in that regard, you're not treating the code differently than you would treat your own code.
Right.
That.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just, just thinking, okay, I go write me this code and then let's go ahead and commit it and, run it through our CC testing pipeline or whatever, just makes me nervous as heck.
Yeah.
It's just called me the control freak or, I go back to surveys I saw, after the various stories and surveys I read in different places after, the first 8, when was it ChatGPT 4, I think was a real big open the floodgates type of event that really got made it, more every day. And people, oh guys, let's build with AI, everything. Hey, we're using AI, even though half of them probably had no idea what that meant. You'd see surveys like, 80% of code that was written by AI ends up getting reverted later. And so that's why I'm just, I'm a real big skeptic. And, when I see it work, then maybe I'll start to trust it. But again, for me, it's just helped to generate ideas and get me going or get me past the sticking point. That's about it.
Yeah, it's
I think
interesting.
The models will get better, but
yeah. It's interesting that we did have at least 2 episodes about vibe coding recently.
Yes.
We brought over both Gunnar, who talked about it from the perspective of doing it as a PM or a PD. Right. And we talked with, who was it, who talked about vibe coding from the perspective of developer. His name escapes me momentarily. I'll remember in a second. That's definitely not what I do. I use AI tooling a lot. I think it's made a dramatic impact on the way I write code, but I'm definitely not vibe coding. I'm not. I'm using it as a tool, not as a replacement. I do know some developer friends who've literally kind of said that they're kind of like behaving a bit like product these days, like really spelling out the requirements in a lot of detail, and then kind of letting the code write itself, as it were. I'm not there, but it has made a significant difference on how I write code. So first of all, about the tooling we use. So I work at Sisense. We do embedded analytics and stuff like that, and AI-driven analytics. And we went all the way with AI. So it's kind of a mandate these days to use AI tooling for the developer task. It's not like up to us to decide whether or not we want to use it. It's really a requirement. So our development environment is Cursor. Most of us use it with Claude 4 Sonnet. And we also use CodeRabbit for code reviews. So we get to get kind of like a 2-layer system in this sense. And we also use Gemini for miscellaneous tasks. So those are the AI tools that we use, and I can later elaborate about the kind of difference that it's made for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Chuck?
So my experience with the AI, using AI tooling, kind of runs the gamut. I also spoke at Commit Your Code conference, but that was more on how to build an AI chatbot, and it just covered the fundamentals. So I'm kind of living in both worlds as far as like building stuff with AI and then also building stuff with AI, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I mean, so just to give you a sense of what I'm using at Prize Picks, they're paying for credits on GitHub Copilot. They'll pay for a Cursor thing instead if I want it, or there are a couple of other options, right? So I can pick my tool. I just already had that, and I'm too lazy to ask for something else because I don't care. And so because it'll do the agent mode or the ask mode, and so sometimes I'm asking it questions. Hey, how would I approach this? Or I need something relatively simple, and I'm just not thinking of how to do it right now. And so it'll put something in, and then I can kind of riff off of it from there, right? So I can go, okay, this is pretty close to what I wanted, and then I can clean it up. Another thing that I've done with it a bit is I've had it help me write my tests. And so
I definitely want to talk about that in more detail because I consider it very much a double-edged sword.
Yes, it is, definitely. All of this comes with the caveat of, I heavily review and modify whatever I'm given. Very rarely do I just accept what it gives me. On the other stuff, on the personal stuff, so building stuff for like top-end devs, or top-end devs is actually hosted on a system, a multi-tenant application that I plan on offering as a SaaS product to allow people to kind of have channels for communities like top-end devs is. And so I've actually, I don't know if I've gone like full vibe coding on it. There are definitely things that I haven't built before and I didn't quite know how to approach. And so I did spell out, here are my requirements. Here are the things I need it to do. And then I would let it code and then turn around. And so I'd run it and see if it was working. And then once I have it working, either because I debugged it or because I had the AI debug it, then I would go in and do some code cleanup and things like that. Hey, I don't like it when you, do a try catch on big blocks of code and then swallow the errors whole or things like that. Right. And because it does stuff that I'm just like, this is such not good practice, but I do get working code out of it. And so, and then I can kind of go and learn from what it did, right? Because it's like, okay, I see your approach here. I don't like this part of the approach, so I'll change that. But then I can see how to do whatever I did. So, for example, the audio player on top-end devs was mostly built with AI. And it was mostly because I just haven't done a ton of stuff with the JavaScript audio interface stuff. And so it could whip it up, right? And then I could go and look at it and say, all right, I see what you're doing here. And then I got it done way faster than I would have done it on my own.
That's kind of an amusing thing, that when I talk to developers, a lot of developers, not all, but a lot of developers about using AI tooling, they sound kind of apologetic. Yeah, it does what I wanted, so I just, took whatever it gave me.
Oh, no apologies here. It's really nice to have for those areas where it's just like, I don't have the expertise here, or I don't have the, I haven't never done this before. And, it gives me a huge head start. So.
Yeah, for sure. It kind of reminds me of those days when I worked at Wix, and a question that used to occasionally come up amongst website builders was that we're actually building websites for customers, is it okay, quote unquote, to use Wix, or is it cheating, again, quote unquote? And I would say, and my answer was, if it satisfies the customer's requirements, what's wrong with it? If your customer tells you specifically, don't use Wix because I don't want it, I don't like it, whatever, then obviously you shouldn't. But if the requirement is to provide a website that does something and you're able to achieve it using Wix and it meets all the customer's requirements, go for it. And likewise with AI, if AI generates properly working code, great.
Yeah.
Why should I waste my precious time on something that I can get from the machine wasting its time? By the way, that's an interesting thing, is that sometimes when I give an AI a certain task, it is able to achieve it, but it takes it longer than it would have taken me. And then I kind of think to myself, like, was it worth it? And I'm sitting here staring at the screen and waiting for it to finish, because I can't really work on anything else while it's doing this stuff, and I really want to see what it's doing. And sometimes it takes a while.
Yeah. So a couple of things on that. I've run into that too. Or it got it just right enough to where I had to keep working with it to get what I wanted, and that's what took longer. But
by the way, as an aside, before you continue, my distinction between vibe coding and AI assisted coding, and it's my personal take, is if you give certain instructions at the prompt and it generates some code, and that code is not good enough for some reason, if you just try to fix it by, again, providing more and more instructions via the prompt and just using effectively the prompt, then it's vibe coding. If you at a certain point actually say, okay, enough's enough, and I dive into the code to get it, even that last extra mile, that for me becomes no longer vibe coding. That becomes AI.
All right, well, then I do a mix. So one last thing that I wanted to add with this is, and we had Eric Hanchett on, and he was talking about, what is it, Kiro? And he was talking about the plan. So on Copilot, on Cursor, and on Kiro, you have the option you can ask, you can allow it to edit some stuff, or you can turn on the agent and have the agent actually, do larger modifications to your code. And then in Kiro, they had a plan option. And so you could tell it what you wanted. And then instead of executing right away and modifying your code, what it would do is it would work with you and ask more questions and get the requirements to build a plan, and then it would execute the plan. And I was fiddling with Cursor, and it just added this.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I've been using that, and I have to say that so for some of the things that I've had to do, that was really, really nice, because I understood better what the agent was going to do for me when I told it to go build stuff. And the other thing is that it really did allow me to flesh out what I really wanted. And so even if I never got around to clicking the build button so that it would go and do the plan, I knew what I was putting together. And so I have to say, I really, really like that. And then one other tool that I used for some of this stuff, for some of that planning stuff before it showed up in Cursor, was I would actually use Grok. And so I like using the voice assistant in Grok. And so I'll tell it, I want a system that does this, and I'm not sure how to do it. So, and sometimes it's more on the ops and infrastructure side than on the programming side per se. But I'll say, okay, I need this. How do I get it? And it'll come back, and I mean, sometimes it's wrong, right? It'll come back and it'll say, you need to use this open source software, blah, 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 blah. And then I go look up the open source software and it doesn't exist. And there's nothing that's even named remotely close to like it, right? But it had all the features I wanted, according to Grok. And then I'll go back and I'll ask Grok for more help, and it'll come back and tell me that open source software doesn't exist. And I'm going, then why did you tell me about it?
Well, it kind of reminds me of that. You remember that thing where somebody, there was this trial and somebody used AI as their lawyer, and it invented past cases, like
yeah. But I have to say that probably 3/4 of the time when I'm asking Grok how to architect something or orchestrate some infrastructure or pull in some open source system that I need to integrate with, it's correct, or at least mostly correct. And again, it just gets me way down the road where it would have taken me hours to go and research it by doing a Google search in the browser and then going and validating some of this stuff. So anyway, so that's how I'm using AI in my stuff.
That's interesting.
So, hey, Dan, real quick, I wanted to go back to our conversation with Gunnar. Sorry, Gunnar, if I'm butchering your name. And you were talking about the difference between vibe coding and AI-assisted coding, at least your distinction. I remember our discussion with him, and his use of vibe coding was basically to generate something that would give him a starting point to talk with designers about, something visual. He didn't care necessarily about the details of what it was doing underneath the hood. He just cared about the hood, right? He's something visual. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. Where can we go from here? So he wasn't, actually doing the coding. He just wanted something visual that he could talk with other people with. So that was how I saw. That's how I guess I would define vibe coding versus, you and I and actually writing code.
Well, I'm not sure.
So hang on.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
Because I lean more toward what Dan was saying in the sense that, so one podcast I listen to is Podcasting 2.0, which is Adam Curry and I can't remember the other guy, but they're the guys that run the Podcast
MTV?
Index. Yeah.
Okay.
But Adam Curry invented podcasting with Dave. What's his name? I can't remember his name either.
Dave Weiner?
But anyway, so they have a conversation every week, and they're talking about Podcast Index and things like that. And Adam Curry has actually been vibe coding a system that hosts podcasts and stuff like that. And to me, he freely admits he's not a programmer. And so his whole process is the AI, right? And so if it doesn't work, he just asks the AI for more help and more help and more help. And then on occasion, he'll actually go and do enough research to get dangerous enough with the code to go look at it and say, no, this is actually the problem, go fix it. And then he usually lets the AI go fix that too. And so if you're working exclusively or nearly exclusively with the AI to get your code out there, and you're not modifying it or using a skilled approach to do the work, then that to me is vibe coding. And I think that's what Dan was saying.
Yeah, exactly. Because by the way, the other person we had talking about vibe coding from the developer's perspective was Anthony Campolo. And that was on episode 687. Anyway, what Gunnar basically said is, I'm a product manager. and consequently, I don't know how to code, or I don't want to code. And therefore, the way that I vibe code is basically just prompting for additional changes. He, by the way, said that as the tools improve, they're going beyond just creating a smarter mockup to a point where, it's getting close enough to a product. And in fact, as we all know, there are services out there that have been built effectively via vibe coding. And again, if you can get it to work well enough, then bully for you. But there have been various situations where things crashed and burned, or had performance issues, security issues, or just plain old bugs that the creator just didn't know how to fix.
Yeah, there was Syntax did a whole episode on, there was one app, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. But the gist of it was that they had built on Firebase and left the default setting for the database so that it was open. And so people, as part of the app, people were required to upload pictures of driver's licenses and for verification. And so because of the default setting that was left there, they left the API endpoints wide open. And so anybody could hit the API endpoints and get all the driver's license information. And it was purely vibe coded. It wasn't people who knew what they were doing. They just said, hey, build the system. They did, and had left this security vulnerability that was just wide open.
That said, how many startups found their lead developers on Craigslist, and they left it wide open? So,
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is that, that again is kind of a high level architecture decision that they wouldn't know to make. But in a lot of other cases, I've seen people that, again, have vibe coded a good chunk of their stuff where security and other factors aren't as serious an issue. And they end up with something that works. And
when is security not such an issue? I mean, sure, if you're uploading driver's licenses, that's probably, you need more security.
I guess that's what it is the consequences aren't as, you're not compromising somebody's identity or something like that. But
but by the way, funny thing, Riverside has an interesting behavior. I logged in as a host, and now when I posted a reply in the chat, it says that I'm you, Chuck.
Yeah.
We can all speak.
My name, Chuck. I think, is on the right. Don't get me in trouble. Actually, maybe I don't care. But the account is set up under my name. That's why. But anyway,
but still, it's funny. No, because it does know my name in the video, so it's funny that in the chat it put your name rather than mine. Anyway, it's funny.
Yeah. But so I kind of want to get into that. I know there were some things about how we're using the AI and LLMs.
I'd like to say about a little bit because I talked about which tools I'm using, but I didn't talk about the processes that I'm using. So I would like to talk about that. So I recently, before I went on vacation, which is going to be one of my picks. So if you are interested in my amazing vacation, wait till the end. So before I went
on vacation too.
So I was working on adding. We are creating this new service, and we are making it possible to purchase the service online. We had not done that with previous services in the company. Previously, everything would go to sales, and so I was working on Stripe integration for our product, and this was, ripe for using an AI because it's all well-known technologies, and very well documented. So I built this service from scratch myself using, as I said, mostly Cursor, also with some assistance from Gemini, and it really sped up the process. So I did not vibe code. I looked at every line of code that, every line of code that was pushed. my eyes scanned it at one point or another. But I did a lot of manual fixes, but I would estimate that it effectively doubled my speed, which is a lot.
So you're now a 20x developer, is that right?
Exactly. No, I'm a 365x developer, and I'm going to let you figure out how that works. As an aside, and I think we had an episode on that once, is that that whole 10x stuff and how we all hate it and stuff like that. I said that on the one hand, there's no really any sort of thing like a 10x, but on the other hand, I would say there's an infinity x, because if you're a certain level of developer, you can do things that others just aren't not able to do. But anyway, going back on topic. So, for example, this, because it was a new project, it required a whole lot of configuration, setting up Docker properly and I use Nest.js for the backend. So setting up a Nest.js project and configuring all the TypeScript and linting and the CI/CD and all that stuff. And I hate configuration. I suck at configuration. And luckily for me, AI excel at configuration. So getting the project up and running was so much smoother and less painful than it would otherwise have been, that it isn't even funny. And that made me so much more productive. And one of you made the comment about what percentage of lines are written by AI versus by developers. I really dislike this measurement because, from my experience, code lines are not created equal. There's a whole lot of boilerplate out there, and the actual quote-unquote smart code is often a relatively limited percentage of the code that you're writing. So the LLM allows me to focus on the code that I need to focus on. And even there, it can kind of jumpstart the process, especially if it's APIs that I'm less familiar with. But ultimately, the business logic is something that I really focus on myself. I don't trust the LLM with the core business logic. I might let it do the first iteration, but I would never commit anything that I don't properly understand.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think your experience lines up very, very closely with my experience, right? And so, yeah, I had it write a whole bunch of stuff. Just to give some examples of what I've used it for. So the scheduling. So I ran into some issues with Schedule once. It wasn't doing everything I wanted. And so I used AI to help me write the scheduling link on the Top End Devs website. And, and so now I can add features to that I don't get in the Schedule once, which is what we've been using to schedule the podcast episodes with guests. And so now we can just send people to a link on our system, and people can, get on our calendar. But again, it sped it up. I was doing stuff that was mostly fairly well understood. I didn't have to go look up the documentation on how to integrate with Google Calendar. I did have to, test it a bunch and, fiddle with some stuff, but I'm pretty sure I got it done in less than half the time that it would have taken me to go and do all the research and figure out how to write it myself. Another one is I've been working on an in-browser visual email editor, right, for a number of projects that I could use it on. Because I have a large enough email list now that it's costing me several $100s a month to use a service to send the emails out to my list. And so I was like, hey, if I bring this in-house, I can save myself a big chunk of change and have it sent out through Postmark sending service instead of Active Campaign. And so again, we can discuss when.
That's an interesting
whether it's worth it, but
observation.
yeah.
That's an interesting observation, Chuck, that I think that a lot of services out there are going to be facing competition from DIY using AI tooling to build a good enough alternative.
Yeah. Well, there's another tool out there that does the visual editing. It's called BeeFree, BEE free. And I was looking at using them, but their service to get all the features that I wanted and their template library is like $1,000 a month. And anyway, it just again,
that's exactly my point.
I could save myself $12,000 a year by sitting down and having AI help me write it, and I have a good enough solution at this point.
Exactly. Now, in the past, you either couldn't or wouldn't, because
right.
it would just take you too much. Either you couldn't do it, or it would just take you too much effort that it wasn't worth it.
Right.
And these days, you say, hey, you know what? I'll give it a go, and there's a chance that you'll actually come up with a good enough solution. So I think
the other thing is it was $1,000 per application, and so exactly. all of the Channel Kitchen's hosting stuff is one application, but I have 4 other projects I want to use it on, and so I'm saving myself $60,000 by having AI help me write it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of services, the existing services, are going to be facing an uphill struggle trying to justify their value proposition going forward in the age of AI. If building a good enough alternative is easy enough, you're gonna have a problem.
Well, the other thing that I've looked at with this, just from the business standpoint, is I can sell and or license my builder that costs me a whole lot less than it costs them to build theirs to other people. And if I allow them to license it and then use my code as kind of a licensed open source, as opposed to a black box that you include into your thing, right? So it just, you just pull the code in or pull it in as a library. And then you can use AI systems similar to what I built in order to modify it to what you need. I think it creates a whole new market.
So I wanted to bring up 2 more points before we end up going to picks. So first of all, you do need, I'll give a concrete example of why, as a serious developer, just vibe coding is not good enough from my perspective in a lot of cases. I might have given this example before in one of our other episodes on the topic of vibe coding. And that's one of our developers where I work was implementing a certain migration code. And it would go to the database and get the data, all the data out of a certain table, which could potentially be very large. And would process it in a certain way and write it back because it was part of a migration, as I said. Now, the first implementation they created just was created using AI, by the way, was really naive in that it read the entire table into memory. And that's obviously problematic when the table can be huge. So when I did a code review on that code, I said, look, this is not good enough because it might cause a problem. And the problem was that they had the AI writing the code and they played with the code manually, but they didn't play with a large enough table, so they never thought about this potential problem. So then they actually had the AI fix that code. So they told the AI, hey, do this in pages rather than read the entire thing into memory. And the AI said, sure, that's a great idea. Obviously, we should do that. like an AI usually says in these types of scenarios. And then the AI wrote recursive code that did it. Now, why did it recursively? I have no idea. But obviously, with recursive code, it means that, again, if the table was big enough, it would blow up the stack, even though it was using pages, because JavaScript does not have tail recursion. And so I reviewed the code again, and I said, hey, not only isn't this code so very readable, because recursion in JavaScript is not necessarily super readable to all developers, it also has this problem that the stack will blow up. So make it not, build the loop as a straight on for or while loop or whatever. And so they told Cursor to do it again. And Cursor again says, hey, that's a great idea. We should obviously do that. And they did it, only they now implemented it as a loop within a loop within a loop, like an O and n to the power of 3. At that point, I basically had enough and rewrote it by hand and pushed the fix in, obviously making sure that it passed the test. But it's funny seeing the limitations of quote unquote vibe coding in this way. So this was one story that I wanted to tell. The other, we kind of mentioned it at the beginning, that AI is really attractive, almost seductive for testing, and it's a super double-edged sword. Now, I don't do TDD, which means that I usually write tests after I write code rather than before. I always wanted to do TDD. My brain just doesn't work this way. We had Shayalin on the show, by the way, talking about TDD. Highly recommended. His brain definitely does work this way, which makes him an amazing developer. That's not how I work. I just can't do it. So what ends up is I write code, I review the code, I play with the code, I single step to the code, and then I write tests for the code, and now I can have AI write tests for the code. And it turns out that AI is great at writing tests for the code. The problem is that if you have a bug in your code, it will happily write tests for the code that pass for the bug. And even worse is when you then change the code for some reason, and it's so seductive to just tell the AI, go and fix a test so that my test will pass, and it will happily do. And again, you introduced the bug, and the tests were supposed to catch the bugs, but you had the AI fix the tests, and now the test passed again. So you have always passing tests, which are effectively worthless tests. So that's a double-edged sword of using AI to write tests. It's really, really seductive. It's something that AI can easily do, at least for JavaScript and the leading testing frameworks. And it's incredibly dangerous because it can nullify the whole benefit of having tests.
Yeah, I completely agree. Where I use it, because I think you brought it up when I mentioned that I use it a lot to write the tests. But yeah, going back to what we were saying before, then I go through it and make sure that it's doing what I need it to do, that it's testing the stuff that's important. Sometimes it doesn't put stuff in that matters. Sometimes it puts stuff in and tests stuff that I'm going, what are you even looking at? But again, it really gives me a lot of the structure. It sets up a lot of my test doubles, mocks, and stubs. It does a lot of the other things that I need for the test. And so it gets me usually 90% of the way there. And then I can approach it and say, okay, but this is the stuff, now that I've got all this set up here that I actually care about. And so, yeah, then I can just modify in the other stuff. Going back to your first example, though, one example that I wanted to share was when I was working on the calendar stuff, I wanted it to check a Google Calendar and see if there were conflicts in the Google Calendar for the time slots that people could schedule for the podcast or other appointments. And so, it followed a very logical process. It would figure out what all the time slots were, and then it would check if each time slot was free. So I had a half-hour time slot, between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And so it would come up with 450 time slots every day or every week, for the next 7 days. And so then it would go and it would say, hey, Google Calendar, is this slot free? Is this slot free? Is this slot free? And so it would hit the Google Calendar API 450 times. It was wicked slow and it was very inefficient. And so I had to go back in and say, okay, is there another API call we can make to just get the free and busy times for the entire weekend? It turns out there is for Google Calendar. And so then it was able to help me write the fix. But, it really, logically it made sense why it chose to do it that way, but it doesn't consider everything. And so, making 450 API calls is probably going to get you on their naughty list if you're doing them that fast. And it's super inefficient. And so, just things like that. It does that kind of a thing all the time. And then the other thing that I found is, again, it really likes try catch stuff, or in Ruby, the begin rescue, which is kind of the same thing, not exactly. But so then it just swallows your errors whole, and it's like, why did you put a rescue in here? If it's not doing what it's supposed to, I want it to blow up and tell me, and it doesn't. And so you just really have to keep in mind that it may have been trained on stuff that's not ideal, both in your tests and in your. But I've also, like Dan said, I've had to write tests where it makes it pass when it shouldn't, or it makes it happy when, and then misses stuff because it just tests kind of the happy path and not the other stuff you care about.
And a lot of projects have like test coverage thresholds, and AI almost essentially kills it, the whole concept, because it's so easy to tell AI, just achieve 80% coverage for me, and it will do it with junk.
Yep, absolutely. So one thing that I wanted to get into before we wrap up is I hear concerns that AI is part of the reason why people are having trouble finding jobs. I'm hearing concerns that as the models get better and it's able to write better code, that it's going to consume some of the jobs out there. What do you guys think about this?
The thing I've been hearing, reading, and I've talked to people in the industry, in other, industries that are impacted by AI, is that you don't see people hiring junior devs so much anymore because they figure AI can handle a lot of this, and you've got to be a quote unquote senior, however you define that term.
They're not entirely wrong. They're not entirely right either.
Jobs. I mean, that's just, I don't have any numbers to back that up, but that's just, I've been hearing that a lot lately.
Same for me. And there, like you said, there is a certain amount of truth in that. If I, as a senior developer, am able to be twice as productive, that means that, if we are a really successful company, maybe we can do twice as much. But alternatively, we could save on our expenses and achieve the same amount of throughput. But it's a problem. I mean, if there are no juniors who are going to be the seniors,
Exactly.
now I'm on the tail end of my career, in a sense. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be able to retire before AI swallows all the jobs. Eventually, maybe. But look, first of all, what I've seen is we've kind of reached a certain wall. Like, I'm not seeing the AI. We saw a period of dramatic improvement, and it seems to be slowing down. We're still seeing improvements, but not at the same rate.
Right.
It's more about the tools getting more refined rather than significantly better. Also, we are like one Chinese invasion of Taiwan away from this whole thing coming down like a house of cards. So I don't know. Now, people have been talking about self-driving cars for decades, and think about what that will do for the job market if and when that actually happens. And we are starting to kind of see it happen, at least in certain places. But
Mm-hmm.
if and when it does happen, I mean, imagine all the taxi drivers, bus drivers, lorry drivers, truck drivers being out of a job. There are a lot more drivers, I think, out there in the world than developers. I don't know what to say. Like, eventually it might happen, but when it does happen, that just means that I think AI took all the jobs anyway. And that's it. But yeah, it is impacting the job market, but it's difficult for me to say whether the the difficult times that juniors are experiencing are because of AI, or because of AI hype, or because of just the job market being what it is and things being cyclical.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to say some of the same things you're saying, Dan, but in a different way. So I attribute at least some of the job market to the current economy. And, we kind of had this downturn, a year or so ago, maybe a little longer ago. And so because the job market has been different since COVID, and it's been, at least for the last while, it's been a little bit slow anyway. And so I see, in some ways I see it coming back, and in other ways I see it kind of staying where it is. And so I think there is some economic factor to it that has nothing to do with AI. That said, I do believe that there is some level of impact that AI does have and is going to have. And I think you guys both expressed this, where, yeah, if I'm running a company and my developers can be twice as efficient, and I can maintain a good market position with half the workers and still get the work done, then yeah, it may be a consideration to, reduce my workforce, or at least not replace people when they go. If you're in a highly competitive space, though, then if your people are more productive and you can afford to keep them on, then your strategic advantage is to figure out how to do it again so that they're twice as, they can double their capacity again and again and again, to the point where you can, overtake anybody ahead of you in the market and then continue to be competitive. And so I don't see it as an overall loss in jobs. I think it just depends on who's making the decision and why they're making the decision. And then the other piece of it, as far as juniors go, I think it presents both a challenge and an opportunity. Because if you're thinking about juniors in the sense that, hey, they're the people who kind of handle this level of task, and we just kind of lean on them for that kind of a thing, and that's all they do, then yeah, right. A lot of the AI, LLM stuff is going to handle a lot of those things. But, and this is a big but, the opportunity presented for juniors is also, in my opinion, a huge one. Because if you as a junior can figure out how to be productive on the level of a senior developer by using AI and using it as a learning tool and an opportunity to get stuff done, and you can begin to demonstrate that for potential employers, you have a much higher likelihood of getting a job. And some of these companies are going to be forward thinking enough to hire juniors or to hire interns. And so the opportunities are out there. They might be a little bit harder to find, or might be a little bit less common. But this is the opportunity, because I think a lot of folks just think, well, I went through the boot camp and now I'm supposed to find a job, or I just went through college and I'm supposed to find a job. And the reality is there are a lot of opportunities that you have with AI where you can actually go out and make yourself, bring yourself to the top of that lower end market, and then be able to find a position. And then the other thing I'm also seeing, and we talked a little bit about this, is go out and build your own thing. right? Because you do have skills above and beyond kind of the business person that might try and vibe code something. You actually understand how some of the code works. And so you may be able to create an opportunity that is not a full-time job like you thought you wanted, but is actually some entrepreneurial or other opportunity that you can see out there. And so I don't think it's hopeless for junior devs. I think the opportunity has just changed its shape and look. And so you have to be very aware of what's out there and what people actually want, and then figure out how to have it. And you've got this amazing productivity and training tool in the AI LLMs that will help you pick this stuff up and move ahead. And so that is something that I just really want to encourage people. It's not a lost cause.
I totally agree. It's kind of a disruption period, and disruptions represent risks and opportunities. It's like, when everybody kind of moved to React. It doesn't mean that if you finish the boot camp before React, you're out of luck. In fact, you might have an advantage because you would know stuff that other people who have just learned React don't know. Likewise, if you're now entering the market and you come in with, if you learn how to make good use of these AI tools and to leverage their capabilities and be aware of their pitfalls and learn how to make the best use of them, you probably have an advantage over most of the people in the market.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's been my take. I've been trying to encourage people. I haven't done a good job of it because I'm not talking about this as often as I should. But yeah, I think I think the opportunities out there are tremendous. And so, all right, well, let's go ahead and do picks. We're at an hour now, and honestly, I need to get back to work here soon anyway.
Me both.
So yeah, Dan, do you want to start us off with picks?
Sure. So my first pick is that this has been a really emotional time for me. For those of you who don't know, all the living Israeli hostages, the remaining living Israeli hostages that were being held by Hamas for over 2 years, have finally been released.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody here in Israel
I've been celebrating for days for the last day or so.
I just tweeted like how I feel today on that day and put a link to Here Comes the Sun. It's like we've been walking with this weight on our shoulders for the entire time. Like you go out with friends, you have a good time, but in the back of your mind, you constantly have that nagging feeling of guilt, of they're suffering and I'm enjoying myself, and what can I do, and so it kind of lifts this huge weight off of your shoulders, and especially when you realize the how they've been tortured in these tunnels during the past, especially the last year, essentially from the beginning, but especially the last years has been especially hard. Some of them were kept literally chained in cages throughout the entire time. They were starved almost to death. They were tortured, burned. It's awful. But they're released. It looks like hopefully they'll all be able to make a recovery. So it's such a huge relief. It's difficult to explain. Also, the fact that it looks like the fighting is hopefully coming to an end, hopefully in a way that will guarantee the safety and eventual prosperity of everybody in this region. Unfortunately, I'm not yet sufficiently optimistic in the long run, but at least people are not dying on a daily basis right now. Although Hamas, it seems, are turning their guns on their own population and executing Palestinians in the street. So then that's pretty horrific, but nobody in the West seems to be caring about that. But it is what it is. So my first pick is about that. One last thing in that context is there are still the bodies of dead hostages. I know that some people don't like the concept seems weird to them. How can somebody be in how can a dead person be a hostage? But it's really important for the families to achieve closure, and I really hope that all the bodies will be recovered during the upcoming days and will really put this dark episode to rest. So that would be my first pick by far. My second pick is that I've just come back this week from a 2.5-week vacation in Tuscany, Italy, which was amazing. I highly recommend taking vacations. We talked about it in the past that people don't take enough vacations. From my experience, especially people in the US, seem not to take enough vacations. People in Europe and Israel are kind of mandated by law to take a certain amount of vacation, and I understand the situation in the US is kind of different in this regard. And there's this whole also cultural thing where people are expected to take a certain amount of vacation, and again, it's really important for your health and well-being. Like I said, we went to Italy, mainly Tuscany. We love Italy. We love going there. It's a lovely place with lovely people, lovely scenery. I've tweeted out or X'd out some pictures from our trip. You can take a look. It's really beautiful there. So I highly recommend visiting if you can make it, if you can afford it. One last technical pick, something that we probably will want to have a show about. Remix 3 was announced. They had a conference about it. There's also been a conference about React itself, ReactConf, which some news came up. We should probably have an episode about that. But those were mostly a lot of small things. Remix 3 is one big thing. They basically kind of decided to ditch React. So if Remix was a meta framework built on top of React, as in Remix 1 and Remix 2, Remix 3 is a reimagining at the framework level. They're building effectively an alternative to React. It's really interesting. They have some interesting concepts. I will put a link to the relevant part of their video in the show notes. There's also an interesting alternative. You should watch that. You can also, in addition, watch Ryan Carniato, who we've had often as a guest, the creator of Solid, actually responding in real time, like watching the Remix video and reacting in real time to what he's saying. I consider him to be probably the most knowledgeable person about frameworks in general. So it's really interesting to see his analysis and his response to what they're doing. Obviously, he's doing it from a certain position. He's the creator of Solid, so he does have his own thoughts and ideas about how frameworks should work. But it's still really, really interesting to watch his response. I've already reached out to Ryan Florence to come on this show to talk about Remix 3. He was positive about it. I'll remind him now that it's out. He basically said that he wanted to wait till it's out. Now it's out. I'll try to reach out again. Hopefully he'll be willing to come on the show, and it looks like super interesting stuff, a lot of interesting concept and ideas. I've not yet played with it myself, but it looks really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I want to just back into a couple of your picks here. There are a lot of things that are said about the conflict in Israel. I'm not going to wade into the politics. I just think it's a tremendous thing when hostages come home. And so, regardless of how you feel about Israel, Israeli government, Gaza, Hamas, any of the rest of it, the fact that these people are being reunited with their families is it's such a big, big, big thing. And
I will almost totally agree with what you said, in the sense that I agree that regardless of what you think about Israeli government, about Israel itself, about Gaza, about Palestinians and rights and whatever. Anybody who has positive thoughts on Hamas is, from my perspective, is beyond the pale. They're a nihilistic, fundamentalist, jihadi, terrorist organization, literally murdering and torturing their own people. Even, I can't say anything of good about Hamas.
Right.
Everything else, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, my point is people say in here a lot of things about the conflict. I agree with you on Hamas. I think if you don't think they're a terrorist organization that does ugly things to their own people and to other people, go do your homework. Because you're totally missing who these people are. But the reality is I'm just delighted that these people get to go home to their families.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Again, for the for the people who have died, who were being held hostage, same thing, right? I imagine if it was one of my family members, this is what I would want, is I would want them to be able to come home one way or the other. And so, yeah, anyway, so that's definitely a happy thing.
Thank you, Chuck.
So anyway, I just wanted to express that, because I feel like a lot of these things, they feel far away, but they do kind of impact us all. And it's all part of being humans, is recognizing that these are things that shouldn't happen to other people or to us.
Some of the hostages were actually American citizens, by the way.
Yes, some of them were. All right, Steve, what are your picks?
I could give a whole diatribe on what you guys were just talking about, but I'll stick with the dad jokes for the day, bring a little humor to things. So, went to the park the other day and I got kicked out because I was organizing the squirrels by height. Turns out that people get mad if you start criticizing.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this next one is antithetical to my usual opening, but I'll tell it anyway. Do you know why good-looking people are busier than average-looking people? I'll tell you later. I'm pretty busy right now. And finally, I went in to open a new bank account the other day, and I said to the banker, "Can I open a joint bank account?" I know that's not a marijuana joke. He said, "Sure, with who?" I said, "I'm not picky. Any rich person will do."
There was this stand-up, there was this comedy show on Israeli TV where it was about this young couple who are starting their life together, and they're they move in to live together. They're starting to think about marriage, and at one point they decide to have a joint bank account. So they sit at the bank with the banker at the bank, and the guy tells the guy, "Oh, I see that you've been saving a lot, and you've saved like $30,000. That's really great to start your life. And now together, both of you have $25,000."
Oh, nice.
And then he, his eyes open up like saucers. It's really funny. But anyway.
Yeah, there was I remember there was I saw this story about a basketball player in the NBA. This is years ago when Michael Jordan was playing. And he was a teammate of Michael Jordan's on the Bulls. And he was a lesser known player, not anybody whose name you would know. And he had scored I guess the game-winning basket or some big basket, but he only had 2 or 3 points. And he said, "Yeah, between Michael and I, we had 35 points tonight."
Right. All right, I'm going to jump in with some picks. I usually start with a board game pick, so I'm going to do that. It's actually a card game. It's called Infiltrators. And it's infiltrators spelled like traitors, like people who betray other people.
TRAITOR.
Yeah. And so, anyway, the way that it works is you basically have mafia. Anyway, it's got that kind of a feel to it. It's got Japanese characters on it, so maybe they're Yakuza or something. But anyway, so you have Yeah, but it's a card, it's a color and a number, and it's face down in front of each of the players has one. And then you have cards in your hand, and you can pass your cards in your hand to other players, and then they orient the card to tell you whether or not it has anything in common with the card that's face down in front of them. So you know what's in front of you. You don't know what's in front of everyone else. And then once you figure out what the card is, then and it actually has a little gun prop that eventually we just quit using because we were just like, you have the right, but you're supposed to execute the mobster. But yeah, we just point out you have the red 15 or whatever. And so by process of elimination, you're able to figure out what the other players have in front of them. You can also place the card and orient it the same way on the card in front of you. The difference is if you put the card in front of somebody else, then you can draw a card from the draw pile. And if you place it in front of yourself, then you can't. And there are ways to get cards, and you can't place it in front of somebody else if there are no cards left to draw. And you get so many tries in the round before you're done, or before you lose. And so you're trying to catch all the traders before time's up. I think we play it in like 20 minutes to half hour. It does have a little thing to keep track of, so you can like cross off colors and numbers that sit in front of each of the cards that you're trying to guess. And obviously you can't tell anybody what you have. But anyway, it was a fun game, really fun game. I'm going to be teaching at the game convention in a few weeks, and this is one of the games we're teaching. And yeah, anyway, it's super fun. So Infiltrators came out in 2023. Board Game Geek has a weight of 2.11, so it's complicated enough to be interesting, but very approachable for casual players. You can play 2 to 5 players. We usually play it with 5 players, and it's ages 10 plus, and I think that's probably about right. So Infiltrators, fun game. So I'm going to pick that, and then the other pick that I have, and this is something that really has affected me lately, and I haven't been on the show since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And for those of you who know much about me and where I'm at, Charlie Kirk was assassinated at Utah Valley University, which is literally like 20 minutes from here. I know a lot of people who were present when the shooting occurred. And there are a lot of aspects to this that affect the communities that I associate with locally. And, going back to this idea of, what we should or shouldn't see happen. Nobody should be killed or have violence occur to them because of what they believe. And so I guess what I'm really just asking people to do is, if you're harassing people because of what they believe, or, thinking that people deserve to have terrible things happen to them because of what they believe, think again, right? We're all doing our best. We're all trying to figure this stuff out. We're all trying to help each other live better, or at least I hope so. And I feel like that's what Charlie Kirk was trying to do. And so, yeah, anyway, it's really made me think about, where I'm at with my life and what I'm doing and what I want to accomplish and what I'm willing to stand for. And I hope people will kind of take that away too, and take a minute to really figure out who you are and who you want to be. Because at the end of the day, and I think this was part of the message that Charlie Kirk had, was, yes, it matters what you do, but a lot of it matters who you're becoming and where that leads you and what you do. And so, anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge him on the show. Again, I try and not bring the politics into things too heavily. And so I'm not going to go into his political leanings and things, but, yeah, at the end of the day, go watch the memorial that they had for him, kind of go see what he was about a little bit, and then, yeah, evaluate where you're at, what you're standing for, and what the ideas are that you espouse, and then have a little compassion for people that maybe think different from you.
For sure. That's an amazing message, and I totally concur.
All right. Well, I think that's everything. So we'll go ahead and wrap up. Until next time, folks. Max out.
Adios.
Bye.